In this episode, I'm interviewing CEO and founder of Suburb, Rachelle Panitz. Hi everyone, it's Adrian from Woman and Beyond, and I'm here with Rachelle Panitz. Rachelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Adrian. It's wonderful to be here on Sydney Harbour today.
It's not a bad backdrop, is it?
Gorgeous.
Rachelle, can you introduce, I would introduce you, but I think it'd be a disservice. Can you introduce just briefly what you do, specifically in regard with So Brave and what So Brave's about?
Sure. So Brave began about 18 months ago. I met a lovely woman by the name of Wendy Fantasia at a conference called the Art for Business Conference in Melbourne, and we got chatting. She told me a bit about what she does. She's a body paint artist, and I hadn't really ever met a body paint artist before. I mean, you meet plenty of face painters. As a mother, you definitely meet plenty of face painters, sure. But I'd never met a body paint artist before, and she suggested painting me, and I was a little bit, I don't know about that, and I decided to have a chat with my husband, and we were out at a retreat, and I said to him, I think other young women who've had breast cancer, so I'm a breast cancer survivor myself, would really benefit from this experience of having like a full body paint and the transformation that process has on a person and their body image. And I think particularly what I was first thinking about was that, for young women when they get a breast cancer diagnosis, there's such a focus on getting them through the treatment that at the end of it, they're kind of left with the scars and all of the other just getting with it and coping with it, that they're kind of like, what just happened to me? Do you know what I mean? So, they go through so many different body changes, from losing breasts, getting chemo treatment, radiation treatment, losing their hair, their body size changes, their fertility status might change. So a lot of young women become menopausal during treatment. So that means then they're not able to have children. So it does have a lot of long-term impacts. And so what we're trying to do through the So Brave project is to really raise awareness that young women get breast cancer too, and through that an educational process to enable more young women to be breast aware. So to know what's normal for themselves, so that they go see a GP or their local healthcare provider when they notice something that's not normal, and actually have that empowered state to say when a GP comes back to them and says, well, you're young, you're low risk, and all of those kinds of things, that, well, actually, no, I want you to go, get me to get some scans because this isn't normal for me, and knowing your body, and just having that ability to be your own best health advocate.
Sure.
So not just with breasts, but going and getting all of the things that you need to get checked out, and just knowing, and something's not working right, that you're going and getting it assessed.
When you say young, just to give the viewers an idea, what age are we talking about? Because I know there's, at least for me, there's a preconception that you probably don't have to check your breasts for breast cancer until, I guess, you're 40 or 50. So when we're talking young, how young are we talking?
No, we're talking as soon as you grow them, you should know them. So this year we're helping the McGrath Foundation, and one of their slogans is, if you grow them, know them.
Right.
So we're talking about, rolling out in the next years, education campaign to teenage girls, so that they are equipped with the right techniques and the knowledge of how to check, and they're doing it on a regular basis, so that when and if they ever have the unfortunate situation where they find something that's unusual, they've been doing that over a number of years, and they can go see a GP and say, well, look, this wasn't there last time I checked. Unfortunately, a lot of the messaging is out there for older women, because that's the majority of people who do get diagnosed. But women under 40, who are our target market, do get diagnosed with breast cancer. And unfortunately, that's generally a time in their lives when they've just gotten a mortgage, they've just started having kids, or maybe they haven't started having kids yet.
You think you have your whole life
Exactly.
ahead
There's
of
a
you.
lot of stuff that's still coming, and there's a lot of pressures as well. So to have that additional pressure of having a life-threatening condition handed to you, it just changes lives. So I guess what we're trying to prepare people is, we don't want people to get breast cancer, but if you're going to get it, let's get it early so you have the best possible outcome, the best possible chance of survival, because that's what we've got right now. And through our program, we want to invest in research so that particularly young women have better prevention, diagnosis, treatment and monitoring of breast cancer, because at the moment there really is only a few diagnosis tools out there to assess whether or not you've had a breast cancer up here in breast.
Is it possible to just briefly go through what might be the physical signs in order to go, okay, I might have a problem, I might not, but let me go and get checked?
Yeah. So one of the things that they always talk about is look.
Okay.
So you should be doing, first of all, breast checks should be happening on at least a minimum of a monthly basis. And we say to women...
Self-check?
Self-check.
Right, okay.
Self-check on at least a monthly basis. So we say that, if you're getting periods, that it should be at least 10 days after the start of your cycle. So you're mid-cycle and your breasts are as, least lumpy that they can be in your cycle. Okay. And so the first thing is look. So you're assessing whether or not there's any pulling in of the skin, any changes to the way one looks that it didn't look the last time you checked. Anything abnormal. Discoloration could even present as a breast cancer. And I think when we're talking about breast cancer, it's important to know, which the general population doesn't necessarily know, but there's actually 9 different kinds of breast cancer. 9 different kinds, and I don't even know them all. Right. But it's lumped into this one big thing, and then when you get over to diagnosis, then you find out the specifics of what your cancer diagnosis is. And that has its own impact and its own, there's outcome differences for different kinds of breast cancer. But so back to how we're checking. Yep. So you're looking at it, if there's any puckering of the skin, if there's any dimpling of the skin, if there's any changes of colour, if one of your nipples has inverted where it hadn't previously, that's also an indication. If there's any kind of ooze or discoloured kind of discharge coming from your breasts, that's kind of important, particularly for breastfeeding mums, I think, in that particularly in the younger women, if they're breastfeeding and they're noticing some lumps and things like this, they may go to a doctor and the doctor might say, oh, it's mastitis.
Okay, yep.
So the advice that we've been given is that if you've got a breast symptom that has been ongoing for at least 4 weeks, then you need to go and get some kind of imaging. And imaging could include an ultrasound, which is very low toxicity, and it could go right up to an MRI, a CT scan, or even a mammogram if you could get that. So I guess what we're trying to say is do that look, and then it's time to feel. So certain people have said to me, I felt it this way, but I didn't feel it that way. So it's important to be able to check it in a number of different ways. And sometimes we hear about doing it in the shower with something soapy so that it's easier for you to get some less friction when you're doing that. But really what you need to be doing is a flat hand and circular motion, and right up into your underarms, because your breast tissue actually runs all the way around, up into your arm and around the side of your body. So what you want to be doing is checking and feeling all of that. And basically what we're trying to get an understanding of is what's normal in there, because some girls do have lumpy breasts, and that's those lumps are perfectly fine, and there's nothing to be concerned about. But what we're trying to educate is about, is there a change? Is there a difference? And if any of this is a problem or you're concerned, and by no means take any of my advice over your doctors or your primary health care providers, because you need to be able to present to those people to make sure that if there's something that you notice or you're just not sure and you just want some education around how to do that, they're your best port of call, because that's what they're paid and trained to do.
So if you do notice something, then the GP is the first place to go to?
I think so, yeah. And what you want to be doing with your GP is building up a relationship over a number of years, so that they're able to trust and you're able to trust them to show you initially how do you do a breast check. And also then if you notice something or you're just unsure, that they're able to reassure you or send you for scans. I think one of the things that disheartens me the most about the stories we hear from young women is that primary healthcare provider is the biggest point of contact in terms of whether or not that person will get an early diagnosis or not.
Sure.
Because if they empower that young woman to go and get scans and they test it and then we all move on with our lives and it was nothing, then that's great. But if there's this feeling that, oh, you're young, you have no, you couldn't possibly, all of that, then really you're leaving girls in that predicament then that they're feeling like, oh, well, this is a burden on me to go and say something to my GP or my primary healthcare provider, and I don't want to burden them and I'm just being silly. You're never being silly. If you notice something, and it's this gut instinct that we need to sort of check in with, you know,
which we are normally pretty good with anyway.
I think so. Getting back to what the So Brave project is, we ended up creating a calendar. I was Miss February last year, and my tagline in the calendar was that you really do need to trust your instincts. Because for me, I had to go multiple times to see multiple different specialists before I got my diagnosis.
Right.
And had that not happened, had I not pushed, then I do wonder at times, where would I have been? Where would I have been placed if my diagnosis was later?
Right. Why did you have to push? Because one would assume if you're having these sort of, I would like to assume if you're having this sort of trepidation, oh my God, something could be wrong.
Yes.
That you go to your healthcare provider and you're reassured.
Yes.
They don't make you feel worse, and they certainly don't want to make you, they shouldn't be making you feel bad about going and wasting their time. So what happened with you?
Okay, so it was probably because it is such a low risk. So it is still very low risk in young women.
Yeah.
So when a healthcare provider is looking at your risk factors, they don't want to over medicate. They don't want to over scan or do those sorts of things. But from my perspective, if a young woman is coming to a doctor or a GP, primary healthcare provider, and is saying to them, this isn't normal for me, they need to take that on board and send them for scans and absolutely make sure that that's not the case. In my case, I was told that it was normal fibrous tissue and not to worry about it. And it was still there. So I found the lump when I was pregnant. And then my son was born and it was still there. And I actually said to my husband, I think it's getting bigger. And that's when I started getting a little bit freaked out. And I called my obstetrician and unfortunately I got put over to my GP. My GP, wonderful woman, sent me off for a scan, but the scan didn't show anything. And because I was breastfeeding and I'm 10 days postpartum, they couldn't find anything. But there was a little bit of unprofessionalism in the presentation of my results in front of a whole bunch of other patients that made me sort of think, this isn't great. And I spoke to my mother about it.
Why was it being presented in front of other patients?
I don't know. I still don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, basically being told my results in front of every other one. Yeah, not cool. Very unprofessional.
Yeah.
So anyway, I went and got yet another scan done in the new year, and thankfully she was able to find it, and as soon as I saw it on the ultrasound, I knew it wasn't normal. I mean, the one thing about having children is that you do get a lot of ultrasound, so you do get to sort of see, oh, well, that's like internal structure, and then there's a baby. So I could very clearly see the lump in my breast on that ultrasound when she got the wand in the right spot, and it quickly progressed from there. So I went in fairly naively thinking I want to get that reassurance. I'd said to my aunt, who was looking after my not yet 6-week-old son and my 3-year-old daughter, No, I don't need any help. I don't want anyone to come with me. This is just to make sure that I'm not being completely hypochondriac, paranoid. Because I went in there thinking those things. I went in there thinking, oh, you know, I'm a worrywart. This couldn't possibly, there's no family history in my family.
Right.
You know, my mum's part of a huge family of women. Nobody on my father's side either. None of my cousins or anybody like that. And, you know, I'd breastfed my first daughter, which is supposed to reduce your risk. I'd done a lot of things that are supposed to be low risk factors. And being a young woman itself is still a young risk factor. So I went in there thinking a bit naively, oh, this is nothing, it'll be fine, I'll be home in an hour. As soon as she found it, it was the relief almost, because finally...
You knew what it was?
Well, it was there. I wasn't imagining it. It wasn't me just thinking, oh my God, I must have cancer. There was, and at that point, to be fair, it wasn't necessarily cancer, but the radiologist walked in. So they quickly then gave me a single slide mammogram, and then they did a core biopsy in the space of an hour. Right. So they found it and punch, did it all. But your head's just whirring. You know, you're in this bit of a trance about, holy hell, what has just happened? What have they just told me has happened to me? And so, you know, I don't really remember too much about that.
Sure.
But I do remember the radiologist coming in and telling me that even if the tests that they were sending back for the biopsy came back negative, that she was very worried about what she'd seen on the mammogram. And, you know, these people are professionals. They see these things all the time. Yeah. They might not always see it in a young woman, but they do see those sort of things, so they're trained to look and find that sort of thing. So now, looking back at that, and I saw the mammogram image that, like, as immediately as it was taken, I was shown it, this little black sort of area there with pinpricks of light, which are called microcalcifications, which are an indication sometimes of breast cancer. And so you could see it was very defined that there was a lump there. So from there, then I got the news on the Monday afternoon, and the whirlwind began. So then you're kind of put in this place that you're like making decisions about whether or not you're going for surgery, if you're going to go see an oncologist, what kind of chemotherapy you're going to have and how long that's going to take, and then radiation or not, or partial mastectomy or full mastectomy or both mastectomy, and then you've got all of the reconstruction considerations. But particularly for younger women, if you're going to go through chemotherapy, there's a very high chance that you will become infertile. And I'd only just had a baby. He was only 6 weeks old. So I wasn't thinking about having another baby anytime soon.
Sure. Wrong time to ask.
So you know, we went through an IVF cycle just to sort of preserve something, but unfortunately that wasn't to come to pass for us. But, you know, I had the opportunity at least. Some girls don't even, they get rushed straight in, and they have to get, because their tumours are so large or the prognosis isn't great if they don't. So at least I had that opportunity to have that, you know, little breather before I started chemo, and chemo was brutal. I had 4 cycles every 3 weeks of EC. So, you know, you start getting all these terms that you're like, I had never heard of this before. Sure. But then all of a sudden you're like, I've had EC. And it's almost like the cancer card. You can, I've got that. Oh, you had that one? Yep, I had that one.
Coffee club card.
The kind of club you don't really want to join. Sure. A drug called epirubicin and another drug called cyclophosphamide. One looks like red cordial being injected straight into your heart. So I had a portacath put into my chest here, which went directly into my heart, which meant that every time they give me chemo, it would be taken in quickly, and my veins wouldn't shut down, which was a blessing. So this stuff would go in. And I have to tell you, I used to really love red cordial, but I can't even look at it now because of the association between this stuff that was because it would make me feel quite ill. And it would take me a good week to get over that cycle. And so that's why they spaced it out every 3 weeks, because it was so toxic. During that time, I had concerns about whether or not any of the cytotoxic effect would impact my children. So we moved in with my mom and had some support there, because as you can imagine, I was on mat leave, but we have a newborn, and then I can't really look after a newborn. I'm going through chemo, and had a lot of help from my family, and I didn't want to impact or adversely impact the children. So for a period of about a week after those 4 rounds, I wouldn't touch the kids. So I'd kiss and hug them before I'd go, and we'd been told some terrible stories about cyclophosphamide burns, which I won't recount.
Just from touch? Or from other?
Bodily fluid sharing.
Yep, all right. Got it.
Yeah. So I mean, if it's that bad that it can burn somebody else because of that, then I just didn't even want to risk it with my children. So after that was all finished, then I started 12 weeks weekly doses of Taxol, which is a different kind of chemotherapy. And because I had HER2 positive breast cancer, I also started getting every 3 weeks, in conjunction with that, an infusion of Herceptin. Herceptin was touted the wonder drug. It's an immunotherapy which directly targets HER2 receptor molecules in your body and actually switches them off.
Right. Wow.
So it has some cardiotoxic implications, but for women who, say in the 80s, for example, women who had, and they didn't even know what HER2 was back then, they didn't even know how to test for it, they didn't know what it meant. It was a death sentence to have HER2 positive breast cancer. But because researchers spent time creating that drug, and it became available on the PBS in Australia, I didn't pay anything for it, which is amazing. And I was able to have access to that. So every 3 weeks I'd have that, and I had that for a period of a year. So I started my chemo in February, those first 4 cycles. Then I started my first Taxol and Herceptin in May, and that went for a year. So I finished in the May, and the very next day we took a trip to Hawaii because we just had to get out of there.
Good for you.
In the meantime, I had 6-7 weeks of radiation after I finished all my Taxol. So the thing, it's draining. Even just telling you everything that, and not even telling you, and every 4 weeks I used to get an injection into my belly that made me chemically menopausal. And when I finished all my treatment, I'd have to go in every 6 or 8 weeks to get my port access so that it wouldn't clog up. So I'm now in a point where I've just recently had my port removed at about 3.5 years after it was put in.
You had it for 3.5 years?
I had it for 3.5 years. Wow. Some people end up having it for a lot longer, which is surprising. Jeez. But yeah, some people take it out immediately afterwards. But yeah, so I was, if you can imagine, it's just the time. Like going into a hospital and you've spent the entire day there and you've achieved nothing but getting a drug infused into you. And then I actually had a reaction to one of the drugs when they gave it to me, which meant that I had this terrible situation. Every time I'd go in for it, I had to have both types of antihistamine to stop me from reacting to it. So I would either be completely passed out or I'd have shaky leg issue and couldn't really do anything about it. So it's just that mental toll of a good 18 months of surgery and chemo and radiation and immunotherapies and drugs and oh my God. And then you get to the end of it, and so now all I'm doing is a daily tablet, and that's it. Wow. Thank God. Because it takes so much time to just go and get, and I know first world problems, I'm here. If I had been diagnosed with this in another country, I might not have been able to even access the proper medical treatment. So yeah, I guess when I tell people that, it's kind of wow, just the the time and the intensity of having a cancer diagnosis is full on. And that's for a positive outcome. I mean, I was no evidence of disease come my second surgery. And then my insurance plan was to have 18 months of chemo and immunotherapy. So, and another 10 years of
insurance plan.
Yeah, and 10 years of hormone therapy. So it's a big deal. And I think for young women in particular, that's an impact on your family. So every time I'd go into the hospital, I can't take my kids in there. I don't want to take my kids in there. There's really sick people in there. They don't need to be running around and annoying other people. So it's just all the additional, the financial impact as well. We were very blessed in that, we were able to ride that out. We had private health cover, so we were able to choose who we wanted to go see. But I've heard some terrible stories about, people in regional areas especially, and what that impact has really costed them. I mean, if I think about just even radiation, it took me 6 or 7 weeks to get all of that done. If you're telling a woman in a regional area that she needs to go get radiation, that's 6 or 7 weeks away from her family in another city. She's not earning an income. Someone needs to look after her kids still. That's a huge impost on a young woman and her family's life. So, or even if she doesn't have a family, just her financial security, So I think, there's so many layers, you sort of start with the let's find it early and educate women on that. And then you get into the minutiae of what a breast cancer diagnosis is about. And it's just, I call it the rabbit hole. You start going down into the rabbit hole and all of a sudden you're learning so many things about treatments and different research and so much. You've become
an expert.
Well, not really. And
probably
see, that's
in a field you didn't want to become an expert in.
Yeah, I don't feel like an expert. I certainly don't think that I know every aspect of it, but you do know your own disease quite well, so you know where you've been and what you're aiming to achieve. So,
can we go back to the beginning of it in terms of catching it early?
Yeah.
Because you said, so you trust your instinct, and if you think there's something there, there's something there, and your primary healthcare physician is not playing ball, so to speak. What sort of scan specifically are you asking for? What can you tell someone to do for you?
Well, I would actually suggest that...
See another doctor?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Because I feel that if you can't build that trust with your primary healthcare physician, then what else could they potentially miss down the track? I think it's important that you've established a really good, strong relationship with your GP so that when things like this come up, because the thing is, we're not just talking about getting that diagnosis, we're talking about everything that happens afterwards. So who's going to be there when you're talking about, going in, so which surgeon are you going to see? Who's going to refer you to all of those people?
And the GP
and who's
is
going to do that?
Call for
exactly.
That. Yeah.
So who's going to provide that whole of life care that you really need when you're going through a diagnosis? So it's not just about, I trust that person to get me the diagnosis. It's, who do I trust to get me through the diagnosis?
So through the whole journey which you just described.
Exactly. So
basically, if you don't trust your doctor, get another one.
I think so. I think that's a really important thing, that we need to have built that really strong relationship with our GPs. And
absolutely.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate my GP and the fact that when I walked in there that day, and I was feeling like, I must be paranoid. Why am I pushing this? Obviously it's no big deal. It's probably just normal. That she didn't just push me away and say, no, that is probably, that she actually did listen to my concerns and say, okay, well, we're getting you in tomorrow to get an ultrasound on that.
Yeah. Rather than just dismissing you as being a hypochondriac.
Exactly. And it's also about, just if something's prolonged as well, because yes, sometimes things are just mastitis or just benign tissue or whatever. But if it's continuing and you're still concerned about it, then follow up. Do it every month or 3 months, 6 months.
Don't ignore it, basically.
Don't ignore it, exactly. Because if it's something there, they may not have caught whatever it was. That's part of it.
How important is the early detection of it, specifically with breast cancer? How much of a big difference can that make? Oh my gosh.
So when we talk about breast cancer, it's 1 in 8 Australian women will be diagnosed before they're 80. So it's the single biggest cancer in our age group, and we're targeting 20 to 39-year-olds. So single biggest cancer.
In 20 to 39-year-olds,
in 20
it's the
to
biggest
30,
cancer.
it's the biggest cancer.
Okay, I don't want that to get lost, because I don't think most people would know that.
No. So most common form of cancer. So I think what we really need to be educating people on is that statistic isn't somebody else's statistic. It could be my statistic. And I was that person. And a lot of people will freely admit that. You know, we've got girls who participate in our calendar who say that, thank God my friend or my mother or my whoever told me to do a breast check. It was my first breast check.
Wow.
And they found something. Jeez. So, you know, you're never too old to start. Start today if you haven't already. I think it's really important to have that early detection, because if you're detected early, there's an 85% survival rate.
Wow, that's huge.
If you're detected at a later stage, so it's gone from being in your breasts to somewhere else in your body, that's what we call advanced or metastatic breast cancer. And unfortunately, those survival outcomes are very, very low. It's 20%. And many women don't survive that diagnosis.
Right.
So if you catch it is a huge difference. So if it's caught early, you go through the treatment, there's potential to live a long and healthy life and move beyond that initial diagnosis. If you don't catch it till it's too late, then that's a terminal disease that you'll be then dealing with. I think where we're trying to aim with breast cancer is that it's managed as a chronic disease. So I said to you, I'll be taking a pill every day for the next 10 years until they tell me I need to take it for 15, or until new research says that I need to do something else. Investing in that research is what's led me to be here today. If they hadn't had looked into immunotherapy, if they hadn't have done the trials to see what was happening to women in the 80s that made them die so quickly from breast cancer, then I wouldn't be here, you know? So I feel very fortunate that I was born in even that I was diagnosed when I was diagnosed. And I think as we continue to invest in research and as new treatments and new cures and different ways of diagnosing and different ways of monitoring whether or not there is a recurrence, because all of those things come into, they all come together, they all coalesce to helping women in the long term. So my vision, particularly for my daughter and for my grandchildren, will be that this is not an issue for them. Like, cancer will be a simple diagnosis, and the treatments will be standardized and personalized to the kind of cancer that you get. There's some amazing, amazing research going on. Last year we supported the Centre for Personalized Nanomedicine, and they're looking at tumor markers on a very microscopic DNA epigenetic level. And I'm probably going to get this wrong, but I'll give it my best shot. But they're literally saying it's not even going to be that we call it breast cancer or colon cancer or skin cancer or whatever physical part of your body cancer. It's what tumor receptor gets turned on in your DNA to make that cancer come to life in whatever part of your body. And how can we turn those off? Or how can we stop it from turning on in the first place? And understanding that more, and reducing the toxicity of the chemotherapy so that, you know, we don't have the negative outcomes that they can have. So
that sounds like cutting edge science right there, science fiction.
It's like, quite honestly, it's amazing what researchers are going to be doing in the next 5, 10, 20 years. And it's exciting for me because in the next 10 years, my daughter will be our target market. And I want to make sure that there's something there for her.
Absolutely. Can we just talk about the flip side if you are supporting someone who happens to have been diagnosed? Whether it's a husband or a parent or friend or carer, what is the best way to support the person when they get that diagnosis and then from that point on?
So there's a lot of resources out there, particularly for breast cancer. I mean, of all the things to get, breast cancer is very, very well resourced in terms of support.
Yeah.
So ensuring that the person who is going through the treatment has that support, whether that be, you know, just knowledge about what's happening to them, or just having the right breast care nurse or health physician to talk through things, even counselling to have a talk through things. But as a supporter, it's so important to go to that person and to take away the things that they don't need to be dealing with. Right. So for a younger woman in particular, you got to think, okay, so she's going to be worried about how am I going to get the kids to and from childcare, kindy, sporting, school, all of that sort of thing. So getting in touch with a community of people to organise to take that stuff off their hands, obviously in discussion, obviously in discussion and agreement with the person going through the treatment, but it's about finding ways that are going to be helpful so that they can focus on getting better. And there's things like, even, you know, there was an example about getting meals delivered to a childcare centre and there being a specific freezer for meals just for families who go through some kind of big dire situation, so that they don't have to worry about meals for that night. They just literally go get a frozen meal, take it home and eat it. And just, you know, working with that family to figure out what are their needs and what are some of the implications. We've even talked to some of our girls this year in particular, single mothers who, had they not had family step in and not the community fundraise to support financially that person giving up their job or stepping away from their job so that they could look after their children while their loved one was going through treatment, how else would they have gotten through? I mean, how would their children have gotten through? So it's really looking at it on a case-by-case basis and seeing, so what's the need for that person, and how can I step in? You know, even just little things like getting the other school mums to provide an extra lunch once a month, once a week, so that the mother knows that that child's getting fed. It's just the little things that, you know, keep the normalcy for the children and the family as well. I know that from my own family, that just even having that structure around, yes, they were still going off to their ballet and they were still going off to their other activities, meant that their lives weren't changing as much as they could have just because I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So it's just, looking on a case-by-case basis and asking the question, not being afraid to ask the question. I think sometimes when we're talking about cancer, it's such a taboo about asking how you're feeling. You know, you're worried that you're going to offend. You're worried that, you know, the person's going to be upset, or that it's going to offend, or you're going to ask a stupid question. Yeah, I think, like, when you're going through that experience, and everybody's different, but I really did appreciate the people who just showed up on my door and said, I'm cleaning your bathroom. And I'd be like, no, I'm cleaning your bathroom. I don't like to accept help very much. And so I think for me, it was more that my friends had to step in and say...
They had to insist.
Yes, because there was no way I could have done it. But I just didn't want to ask the question for the help. And I think a lot of people probably feel that way. If you're an independent person and you've been running your family quite effectively, to have other people come in and then, you know, make your meals and clean your floors and clean your kitchen, like, it's humbling because you're not used to it, but people want to help, and it's important that they're given some way of helping, even if they're just driving you to your appointments or sitting with you getting chemo. Like, those things are important. I mean, I loved just having, for me, I really just wanted somebody to be there with me. They didn't have to do anything. They could have read a book, they could have watched a movie, they could do anything.
They were just there.
But just to have somebody else there and to just have a chat sometimes, or because, as I said, I was there for hours. Hours. You know, I would get there like 9 o'clock and sometimes I wouldn't be finishing till 3. You know, that's a big day, just, you know, because they do your bloods and they do your obs and they make sure that you're able to take the chemo, and then it's the time that it takes to go through you. So it's a big deal. So I think definitely make sure that you check in and just assess the situation. What can I help with? What can I help? And, you know, sometimes it's also important not to overstep. You know, sometimes the family just wants to have their own family time.
Yeah.
You know, they're still trying to get through this and come out the other side so that they're still together.
Yeah, sure.
So just, you know, being conscious of that a bit as well.
I guess at the end of the day, you're going to err on one side, though it's better to ask and maybe get rebuffed than not ask at all because you're afraid you're going to tread on toes.
Absolutely, and it's very difficult to, you know, take the emotion out of it.
Yeah.
But if you, so when I was going through my treatment, I saw a counsellor and she explained it perfectly. As the person getting the diagnosis, you're in the centre of the storm. So you're pushing all of your emotional stuff out to your inner circle. And then that inner circle doesn't put their stuff back on you.
No.
They push it back out to their inner circle. And the reason they're doing that is because you've already got enough stuff going on.
Yeah.
You don't need to be listening to the other stuff going on. But it's important to work through those things at the other end of it, where I'm at now, because, you know, they have the family that have been around me, they have shouldered a lot of that, you know, and it's as scary for people who are near those loved ones not as scary, but it is scary for those people because they're seeing that person go through that treatment and they're seeing what impact it's having on that person. And they're also going through their own fears about what that might mean. So yeah, it's important then to check back in and make sure that those people have ways and means of getting the help that they need as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
What's the what's the next step for the So Brave project?
Yeah.
Where do you see it going, and what would you like it to achieve?
Yeah.
And how can people donate to it as well?
Yes, absolutely. So we were incorporated at the beginning of the year, and we became a fully fledged charity earlier this year too. We're launching that at a special event down in Melbourne on the 22nd and 23rd of September. And so our next calendar is going to be launched around that time as well, so people can purchase that. And they can purchase it not just for themselves, but to pass on to the women in their lives so that they can be educated. There's a lot more information there this year about how to check and how to be breast aware.
Fantastic.
We really want that breast education to extend beyond just the people who buy the calendar, so shared out. Yes, we can accept donations as well. There should be a portal on our website by the time this airs, by the way.
And it's the website's sobrave.com.au.
Yep, sobrave.com.au. We have events across Australia, and they happen around this time. So this is October, and then next year, when we're off doing more of our body paint and photo shoots across the country, we'll be doing some more fundraisers in those local areas. So next year we're heading to Tassie and Western Australia, so they're the only two states that we haven't been yet, which is very exciting. And you know, we really want to be able to offer this to women who are going through breast cancer as a potential for them to have a voice and a platform to share their story, but also to educate other women. So all of the women who are involved in our calendar are diagnosed before they were 40.
Right.
And I guess what we're trying to do there is say that young women do get breast cancer too. So it's important to be vigilant, it's important to be breast aware and to be your best health advocate. And really to support research, because without research, the next steps, the next outcomes won't be possible. So
definitely.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what we do.
Let's wrap this up.
Yep.
This has been a very heavy sort of interview. A lot of information coming out.
I know.
No.
I always go back to that.
But the wrap up is nowhere near that heavy. So there's nothing to do. There's always the same 10 questions. So just 10 random questions. Okay. So here you go.
Yes.
Number one, what is your favourite word?
Favourite word? The first one that came to mind was beautiful. I don't know why, but there we go.
That
beautiful.
makes sense. Okay.
Nice.
What is your least favourite word?
I don't know why, but somebody else said it recently, moist. Apparently it is the
Do you know how many people have told me moist?
apparently it's the most hated word in the English dictionary.
So many people told me it's their least favourite, and then one person told me it's their favourite just because everyone else hated it.
I think maybe I shouldn't say moist, I should probably say cancer, because really it is a hated word for me. Like,
definitely.
But I don't want to give it any power, so I'll stay with moist.
With moist. Let's stick with moist.
Yeah.
What turns you on?
Oh!
And that can be Australians never get this. Americans get this. One of my interviews, I was like, sexually? No, not sexually. I just mean in general. What turns you on in life?
I really love traveling. I really love going places that I've seen in postcards or on TV and like actually being there. Yeah, I love travel.
What about what turns you off?
Mean-spirited people who can't see. Yeah, just mean-spirited people. Yeah.
What sound or noise do you love?
Babies laughing.
Okay, all right. What about what sound or noise do you hate?
Whinging kids.
I was going to guess it'll be that one. Babies laughing is a favourite and babies whinging is the least favourite. I'm sure you've had experience with both sides of that.
Dear me. Yeah.
Okay, question 7.
Yeah.
What is your favourite curse word?
Oh, I can't say it.
Give us a clue. What letter does it begin with?
It's an F. It comes out all the time unexpectedly. I'm surprised it hasn't come out today, actually.
That's a very standard response. It's by far the most popular curse word. Okay, 8th question. What job or profession other than your own would you most like to attempt?
How ridiculous does this sound? Working in Buckingham Palace to see the ins and outs of what happens in behind the scenes.
That's a new one. I haven't heard that one before.
Yeah,
okay.
I don't know, just to sort of see, behind the veil, to sort of see what the reality is like. Yeah.
Okay. I could go with that. I'd like to try and make those people, the guards that aren't allowed to laugh, I'd like to make one of them laugh.
I have done that.
You have made one laugh?
Yeah. So
they're not allowed to.
They're not allowed to, I know. We were at Windsor Castle, I don't know, probably nearly 10 years ago now. Yeah. And we were hanging around the side and they were doing their march. Yeah, we made one laugh. Totally.
That sounds like you could sell that secret for money. Okay.
I know.
What job or profession other than your own would you definitely not like to attempt?
Well, just based on our conversation before, probably the Sydney Harbour Bridge climb people. No, thank you.
Fear of heights, eh?
Yes.
Okay, final question. If God exists,
yes,
what would you like to hear him or her say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Welcome home.
That's a nice one. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Oh dear,
thank you for that information. I'll put all the links below, particularly to sobrate.com.au.
Yep.
And 2018 calendar will be out.
It will be.
Then.
It will be, totally. And it's amazing. It's got 12 amazing women who have really stepped up this year, and especially in regional areas, like you don't realise. Everybody knows those people. Yeah. So they've really stepped up to join us. So yeah, very excited to share that with everybody.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching and see you next time. Bye.